I'm going to start recording.
Okay.
Awesome. We are recording. So we are live with Jess and Maitri. How
Okay.
are you?
Good.
My soul sister. So first we're going to start off. I just want us to close our eyes and just connect. We're just going to breathe for just like 2 or 3 breaths together as we ask our angels and our guides, ascended masters, to be with us, shield us, and also keep our hearts open and really grounded through Mother Earth. And allow for spirit and flow to guide this conversation between the two of us. And that whoever is listening, whenever they are listening, are able to receive exactly what they need in the moment they need it. And I'm going to open my eyes and I'm just going to shuffle my Keepers of the Light cards just to ask for who's with us, their message, while we hang out together and jam out together. I'm excited. Do you have this deck?
Let's see. No, but I think you brought it to Sedona.
Oh yeah, I did, yeah. I literally just pulled him.
I pulled him yesterday.
I pulled him yesterday.
Oh my God. High five.
I have a goose. Wow, I have chills right now.
What?
I've never.
Oh my God. Of course that happened. You want us to know.
I'm like, I just pulled him yesterday and then you pulled him yesterday. He is really. We need to like get together about our card pulls more often in Marco Polo. So just, huh?
Okay, let's pull him in. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna brief, so everyone knows. Do you know how to say? I always like want to make sure I say their names correctly. Is it Hilarion or?
I have no idea. I would
Cool.
say I would have said that too.
Okay. Yeah. So
I don't think they're offended.
yeah, I don't think so. You're right. I think they're like whatever works. So Hilarion is about divine healing, honor your sensitivity, retreat to recharge and heal. Your light can support others. So there's a description, and I will post this in the group for all of us, but the extended message is that the world can seem overwhelming to you, and it's okay to retreat to a safe space every now and then to cleanse and recharge your energy. You may feel called to serve others or share your healing with them, but please ensure you are filled up with light, love, and energy first, so that you are not sacrificing your own development for others. You are surrounded by the healing light of Hilarion and the healing angels at this time so that you can recharge and feel whole. So he's, I think, going to hang out with us to make sure that we are full as we give, it feels like. Does that feel good to you?
Yeah, I'm so glad he's here. He's been apparently with both of us. So
that is wild. So Jess and I, just to brief you all, Jess and I met in Sedona. And I had actually arrived late to Sedona, so I didn't get to meet everybody until the next day. They had all arrived Wednesday, and I didn't arrive until basically like Thursday, 1 a.m. And so I didn't get to meet, I met everybody at once in the kitchen, and we had kind of talked via like a group message. And so one of the first exercises we did, correct me if I'm wrong, we did our inner child work. Like that was one of the first things I did, because you guys did yoga that morning, and I was like, I need to rest because of my travels. And then we came in, met as a group after breakfast, and did inner child work together. And Jess and I happened to sit on opposite sides of the couch, so we just linked up. And it was one of those moments for me, because you went first. We went with the light colored eyes. Whoever had the light colored eyes went first. And so I tuned in as she spoke and different things like that. And I just remember seeing your inner child just like doing twirls. Like she was just like such a like free spirit and just dancing. And, but I remember telling you like, but I know you. And it was like, and it still feels like that. Like, even though we met 2 months ago, I'm like, I know her. Like and it's just so deep. And so we have kept in touch weekly for sure since Sedona, sometimes daily, depending on our schedules. And we just share back and forth and support each other. And you have honestly been, I guess I could talk to you and not just the audience, but you have been such a huge blessing in my life. And one thing that I want everyone to know is in Sedona, she was like the root. She was like such the strong foundation for the group because she wasn't swayed easily one way or the other. Like you were so rooted in such a beautiful way. Like to me, it's just so like I see you as a tree with these deep, beautiful roots, but willing to sway in the wind, you know, and kind of see what's this way, see what's that way, but never breaking your center. And that was such an example to all of us. And we all commented on like you and just your sovereignty, your true sovereignty and your big heart. But at the same time, this unwillingness to sway beyond who you are not, you know, like you're so rooted in who you are. And so that's been such a message and a mirror and a reminder for me that that's okay. And you're unapologetic in it, but you're so loving in it as well. And you encompass both really beautifully. So I think that can be really a hard dance sometimes to be unapologetic about who we are and then offering so much love. And you have mastered that, in my opinion, from what I have witnessed and the energy I get to share with you. Truly, it's pretty amazing to witness. So that's how Jess and I met, although I would be curious one day to really explore when we first met in our yeah. So she has a ton of, because you're a licensed clinical social worker. You have Yothera is your business, and I'm going to let her talk about all of this because there's so much that you've done, and there's so many things that you have to offer. I will not do any of it justice. So I'm going to let you let us know what you do, and then we're going to flow in from there about self-love and shadow and forgiveness. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be here. It's so exciting. This is kind of I was telling Fallon, she knows, so Sedona was my first kind of experience in a 2-month sabbatical. And so I'm kind of coming out of it. So this call is a great way to kind of jump out of it. So thank you for that. So yeah, as far as credentials go, I am a licensed clinical social worker. What that actually means is I have my master's in social work, and then I did 2 years post-clinical work under a psychologist. So I have a lot of mental health therapy work. I've been doing that for 10 years. But then I'm also a Phoenix Rising yoga therapist. If anybody wants to look that up more, the website is pryt.com. So I did that training as well, and it's a way for mental health therapists to weave the body into therapy. But then even past that, I've brought breathwork training into it. I've trained with Michael Brian Baker with the Breath Center. So level 3 trained in that, and then also Reiki trained, and then just a yogi at heart. So there you go. I don't really, I appreciate the formal clinical licensures and all of that, but at the same time, I really think that power comes from our intention. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And was it, what did we do when you were walking me through just my own inner child tapping into healing? What did we do? Remind me. Yeah, in Sedona, when you took the time and you were like, let me help you. I was like, okay.
That was a blend of some Phoenix Rising yoga therapy work and then some what I call embodied shadow work, embodied psychology. It's kind of my own form of that, having a conversation with the different archetypes within you and like the different parts of us. So
yeah, and that would be good for them to know. So Jess really actually saw me at like a really vulnerable, like I don't let my guard down. I keep it together, right? For whatever. But Sedona also calls that of you. And so I had been having some physical pain and some emotional stuff, and anxiety was really rising. And I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't experienced anxiety in so long. So she said, well, I would really love to do a session with you if you wouldn't mind. I was like, are you kidding me? And you helped me a lot. And it was the first time that I had really tapped into my 6-year-old self of like, I just want to be seen. And, she did a beautiful job at walking me through that. And she helped manipulate my body gently. You really guided me through a really deep process, but in a really gentle way. And it was like the opening for me. So thank you. Yes. Thank you. So I'm going to kind of let you lead about your journey with self-love. I know quite a bit about your history and different things like that. But I don't want to overstep ever because it's really your story to tell. So I am just curious, what is your, what was your path in self-love? Like, where did it start? And maybe where did you realize that it was maybe not what you thought it was? And then how did you kind of come back into yourself? Because that is one thing you are so into, like you are here, you're in your heart center and you're so rooted, and that takes work. So share with me kind of where that started, what that was like, and how it is now, and any practices that you have daily or weekly or monthly or stuff like that.
Thank you. Yeah, and jump in if you have like little things to say. So along
Cool.
the way. Yeah. So I figured I would give a little backstory. Fallon knows this, I think, a little bit about me, but I was raised in the Mormon Church since I was very little, since I was born, and I was also born an identical twin. So I'll kind of get into it, kind of how that plays into your question. But my personal story around self-love has not come without some sacrifices. A lot of the sacrifices that have been made along the way have included losing people, jobs, people, situations that I at one point considered my family and my soul family, and also even biological family. So mine might be a little extreme. I hope that a lot of people listening to this don't actually have to go through that, but mine did require me to choose myself above all else. And I've also had to see the shadow in that as well. So there's a difference between rebelling for the sake of rebelling and like owning who you think you are versus actually just being rooted in who you know you are. So there really is a difference, and that can tie into shadow work later. But I guess what I'm getting at is, for me, the journey to self-love has required me to lose people, even up until very recently. And it may continue that way, but it has required me to lose people in my life. Yeah. So tell me again, what more question
You're
around
fine.
that?
Yeah. So in the process of losing people and staying really, really true to yourself, because that's what it is. It's not deviating from the path that you know is yours. How did you begin to, like, what was the process of was the process of continually loving yourself just letting that fall away? Or did you question your self-worth? Did you question like who you were, your self-worth, if you were deserving of love? And what did that look like? And then how did you find your way back into like, yes, I'm worth it. Yes, I love myself. And then we'll go into like what that looks like today.
Yeah, that's great. So basically, a common theme throughout my life in getting to this place has been that oftentimes I would take into consideration the opinions or beliefs of others, and I would doubt myself. So let's say I would, for example, when I came out of the church, I was 25 years old. And I kind of came out in a very angry way, which was ego, right? But I came out really angrily, put myself in the victim and put the church as the villain, like definitely it was not a healthy way, but that's how that went. And then if somebody would be upset with how I came out or what I was saying about it, I would start to doubt myself and be like, oh, well, maybe I did make a mistake, or maybe I did. And the mistake wasn't leaving the church. There really wasn't a mistake. But I think they were showing me that the shadow was not to continue to be the victim of a situation, but to just own the choice and then move forward in the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
so
beautiful.
I think, yeah. So it's not giving our power away to other people's opinions of what we should be doing or how we're supposed to be to make them feel more comfortable.
But when did you see the shadow in that, right? Because I don't feel like we go through these processes understanding that, oh, my shadow's coming up because I'm playing the victim, right? We know that now because of the work that we've done and the work that we continue to do. We're like, oh, hey, shadow, I see you. But for those that are just starting this journey, how did you operate from, because you probably did feel like a victim, and you probably, rightfully so, right, at some point, because when you leave an institution, that that's all you know, and that's all everyone that you love is in, and you're going against the grain, that's not only scary, right? There's that just ingrained fear in general around any religion, and, you know, whatever there, that's a whole other story. But how did you navigate, let me tune in. How did you navigate the, before you realized that your shadow was coming up in the victimhood? How did you navigate to that point? Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
So, so this might actually tie into like all the other themes we're talking about
And
too,
that's
because it
fine.
makes
Like, and it doesn't have to be separate. Like, we can just intertwine, because we're going to get to where we need to go. So I'm not worried about like, okay, cut, like now shadow. So however this works will be perfect. So please bring it all in. Yeah.
okay, good. Yeah, so what came up actually was forgiveness as far as how I got from there to where I am today.
Mm.
Is first I was angry, but then what I realized is I wasn't really angry at the church. I was actually angry at myself.
Mm.
Not maybe doesn't have to be justified, but there was anger there, but it was a sadness, a deep sadness for maybe not living the life that could have been lived for 25 years, you know, or a
Yeah.
deep sadness of why did I let myself, supposedly, why did I let myself give my power away?
Right.
And why did it take 25 years? You know, so the ego puts all the stories, and then the guilt and the shame and all that shadow will come in.
Yeah.
So I had to forgive myself first.
Okay.
I had to forgive myself first.
What
And
did
then
that
from
look like for
there,
you? What did that look like for you though? Forgiving yourself. And what was involved in that? Because like I'm thinking from, if you've never done this, you don't know how to even, and you're stuck in this space of anger and sadness of where you were. How did you begin to forgive yourself? And then those, you know, that played into the pain of all of it.
right. I remember one specific thing that worked really well. One was finding a picture of myself as a very, very young girl, and I actually have her right here on my altar. So let's just show her. Here she is. She's on a bike. See, she's so happy.
Oh, sweet girl.
She's really cute. Anyway, I remember being, I guess, prompted to find a picture of myself where I didn't see any differences in people. I didn't have judgments, and I didn't feel judged yet.
Mm.
And even if we can't quite, yeah, I think everybody can tap into that inner child, even if they feel wounded at the moment. There is an inner child that's also not wounded.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the light and the shadow, there's always a light side to the shadow.
Sure.
So there's a wounded child, there's also a healed child.
Yeah.
Already in us.
Yeah.
So I had to find her, and then from there it was easy to forgive where the fractured pieces started happening, when I started to not trust myself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's when you tell me that, I see her just take your hand. And I think that our inner child does that. She takes our hand, you know, and the healed inner child, and leads us and says, hey, like let's tap back into the being naive and seeing the world through the rose-colored glasses and all of, yeah, I really see that, her just hand holding you for a while in a really beautiful way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's powerful. Yeah. There's quite a few people I feel like that I follow that talk about, and I have that too, placing a small picture of yourself as a little girl or a little boy on your altar to remind you, to bring in that space. I love that. And then, so what did that grow into from there? Then did it start to spread into viewing, did you start to view other people in their kind of little kidness? Okay.
Yeah, you tapped right into that. That was the next step for me, was to see, I mean, even like the bishops, for example, in the church that had, you know, interviewed my worthiness or told me whether or not I was worthy of certain, quote, blessings or whatever that external authority was. I was able to see them as their own child.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be upset at or angry at a child, you know?
Yeah. I have had to do that recently with somebody that used to coach at our gym, and he left on really, really bad terms and was just really mean. And recently I'm like, why have I not looked at him as a little boy yet? And I began to do that, and all I saw was just this abandoned little boy. And then my heart was like, oh my gosh. And so it really does begin to invite in that forgiveness for the other person and compassion for even their unawareness of that they're, we're all operating at the best level we know, right? Our highest self in the moment. So
yeah,
that is really powerful. And I think you'll be okay with this. If not, I'll cut it out. But I want to let the audience know too, that this stuff still comes up for you. The worthiness, the external like authority telling you like, yes, you're ready, or no, you're not ready, or yes, you're worthy. No, you're not worthy. Have you done the work?
yes.
So I think it's important that people know that story still plays.
Yes. And the difference now though is that I can see it for what it is instead of continuing to attach to that as like intuition or truth.
Yeah.
Like anything that's fear-based or causes that self-doubt is an ego-based old pattern.
Yes.
And if I can feel it, I can let it go. I can kind of use like different techniques or tools to kind of alchemize it or release it to the earth and then let it come back as bravery, things like that.
Talk to me about that, because again, I think people will be like, what does she do? Like, what is she talking about? They're her techniques and tools. So whatever you feel comfortable sharing, because we all kind of have our own different way. I know we all use a lot of the same stuff too, but talk to me about that so that, again, those just walking this path have some sort of like tools that they can take home with them.
Yeah, totally. So I use a lot of breath work. So if you look up, I think you can find this on maybe even on YouTube, but one specific breath work is called the 2-part tantric breath. It's all through the mouth, and what that actually does is it releases what I considered the bottom 3 chakras. So it's the bottom 3 hold the densest energy, the guilt, shame, and fear. Yeah. And so this breath actually, because it's all through the mouth, it actually releases at the base of the spine that kundalini energy, and it kind of brings all that up to be released. So look up maybe 2-part tantric breath. Also, if you know Joe Dispenza, he has a really great breath work. I think we talked about that as well.
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah. And then I also use energy work. If you do Reiki, or if anybody that does Reiki, I'll often do it on myself, a lot of times around the throat, or if I have body pain, I'll do that. I also do something called like a manifestation practice, which is speaking out loud to hear it back with our own. There's something about, writing is awesome, but when we speak it out and then our ears hear it, there's a translation that happens there that is really powerful.
So are you speaking the manifestation itself? Sorry, I cut out for a second.
That's okay. Yeah, so I'll say, let's say I've identified that the limiting belief is that this person has power over me or could take something from me.
Right.
What do I want to actually change that into? I'll write it out. So it could be, I have full sovereignty and power over my own choices, or whatever that is. I'll write it down, but then I will actually say it out loud. And if you know the law of attraction, I'll actually like put the feeling behind it as well.
Yeah.
So it's not,
yeah. Very cool. That is, and I think people think that like ritual and stuff is really difficult and you have to have all of these bells and whistles. And we forget that everything was really given to us. Breath work, right? Our breath is so powerful. We were just never taught that it's actually it's so healing. We were given our own tools to heal. Just nobody's taught us how. And so I think it's, the work that you do is really, gosh, I don't want to like belittle it by saying it's amazing, because it's beyond that. It's really powerful, and it's a way to lead women back to themselves. And I think that that's something that you and people in general, and I think that's something you and I are really passionate about, of getting into yourself and rooting and finding what is your truth. Speak the truth, and do the work. So what did you find as people were falling away? Because I know it's probably happened in chunks, right? I feel like that's the way life works. Is you start to experience your first big shutting of people, and it's painful and scary. What does it say about me? What does that mean about me? And we take it all personal.
Yes.
And it's really trusting. It's a lot of trust. But when did you start seeing and really diving into shadow work? And what did that look like for you and what came up? And I know that you have a lot of knowledge on shadow and your 12 archetypes. So I'd love for you to go into that as well.
Sure. I would say that I really, really started diving into shadow work during my sabbatical. So the last,
Oh, cool.
yeah, or me, well, let me say this. I've worked in my profession. I've worked with Carl Jung's archetypes or Carolyn Mace. I hope I'm saying her name like Mace or Miss. I'm not sure.
I say miss, but I don't know either. Again, I don't think that they care.
I think you're right. Yeah. Those are the two people that I've primarily worked with when it comes to shadow work. So I've been doing that for years, but my own shadow, I mean, really, really like diving and digging through that has been probably the last 3 months. Yeah, it's been really good. It's been healing, but painful. And tell me your question again. Sorry, Fallon.
No, you're good. No, you're totally fine. I'm kind of like, I don't ever ask just one specific. I just have like all these things around it. So, okay. So when you started to discover your own shadows, what came up for you and how did you begin to work with it in a way that allowed it to start to heal and be seen, right? Because we're not going to get rid of our shadow. But how do you allow yourself to see your shadow? Like, what is that like for you? How do you allow it? Because it is painful and it's really easy to be like, no, you don't exist, and keep stuffing it down because of all the layerings.
Mm-hmm. How I started to see my shadow was through other people. So I don't know if this is always how it goes. I'm not sure. But for me, it presented itself in a myriad of other people, not just one. It was like business partners, romantic partners, potential romantic partners, family. I mean, it was literally every person has been a mirror for me in this journey of shadow work. So they would either trigger me in a certain way that would help me see it, or I would actually see something in another that really bothered me, but then I realized it was within me that I didn't like.
Right.
So I began to work with that.
So give me, without saying names, right, because we don't want to out people that upset us or trigger us, give me an example. Like, what was one big shadow that like you saw and said that was a mirror to you, and then how did you make the discovery of like, okay, that does, right, we're open, like that exists in me, because we're open to that if we're doing shadow work, like we have to be. But then sometimes it's hard to see where is that in me? Like, how does that exist in me? And so everyone that's taking this series is probably pretty new to shadow work or wanting to go deeper. And so talk to me about just like maybe one or two examples of shadows that came up for you, and then how did you bring it back to yourself? Because that's the hard part.
That's the hard part. Like, yeah. Rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
So I will say I'll use two examples because I think the main theme is like whenever there's an agenda attached, there's a shadow, and it can actually like reveal itself in either a quote good situation or a quote bad situation. So it can be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like this person has this amazing opportunity for me, or this person has a gift for me that I don't necessarily have in myself. So I'm, it can present itself in that way when you think that somebody has something that you don't have and that you need them to be a higher version of yourself. Yes. So it presents that way, which is the tricky way for me.
And that way was a way that you made me aware of. That's how my shadow works a lot. When we did our work together, you were like, do you realize that you're actually, like, I think you called it positive projecting?
Oh yeah, positive projection.
Yeah, and I was like, no, I didn't, but I have done that my entire life. Yeah, so keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, positive projection. Yeah, putting people on pedestals, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the other, I think the word shadow can be like a little deceiving because it makes us think, oh, bad, bad things. Mm-hmm. But it's actually like it can present in lots of ways. And so the other side of that would be like somebody outright like in your life that's not in integrity, that's really obviously doing something that actually you realize is also within yourself. So that can play out, and it's easy to put those kinds of people in the villain role. It can be like, oh, that person is such a bleep, like they're awful, but really you're like, oh, like I've done that before.
Yeah.
Or Yeah. So it can
Yeah.
look.
But what was the process? Did you ever find resistance? Like you would see, okay, we know that something's mirroring back to us, but I don't see where that is in me. What was that like? What was that shadow? If you want to share it, but more than that, what was that like? And how did you get to finally see it within yourself?
Hmm. Man, let me think about that. How did I get to see that in myself? I think that that part of it specifically comes. There's something around the heart with that that's showing up right now. That um, anything that I resisted, I knew I needed to open my heart to, and then I could
Mm.
actually see it. There's something around that was the translation for me. Is if I stayed up here with it, it was like not happening. I couldn't see it really.
It's so true. Every
Yeah.
time I'm struggling with the lesson or the shadow or whatever it is, I'm always called like, you've got to open your heart more. And I'm like, I don't want to. It's so scary. Yeah.
But then I
Yeah.
feel like the true vision is in the heart.
Oh,
The true
yeah.
vision is here. And if that's not open, you're not actually seeing anything.
And it's easy to get caught up here because that's where we've been taught to live. Of
Yes.
let's figure everything out here. And it's like, really, it's all the answers are here. We just got to open, which is, yeah, that's scary work sometimes, given what we want to protect that.
Right.
Exactly. And one thing, there's a coach that I follow that she always says, the heart is a muscle, and muscles tear and they expand. So when you can think of it like you're not going to break your heart, it's not fragile, it's actually really strong. And that always helps me trust the process of the heart opening.
Yeah. And there is
So,
something too around trusting that, like back to your question of how did you actually get to see that your shadows. I think there's a vulnerability that has to happen, as well as opening and surrendering to being willing to see them,
mm,
and trusting that you will be able to heal them, is trusting that process, because then you're not trying to protect yourself the whole time.
yeah. And I totally agree. And do you find that your shadow, I will just say what I find for me. I find that my shadow comes up a lot in who I used to be. So if somebody mirrors back to me the way that I used to operate and I don't anymore, it still will like trigger me because I'm like, you can heal that. You don't have to operate like that anymore. What the hell? Like I did this work, you could do it. And I'm like, whoa, whoa. And so I have to like, do you find that as
Yeah,
well?
I
Yeah,
do. Yeah, and it's just an indication of where I haven't forgiven myself.
totally.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
I still hold myself on a, like, I'm really hard on myself in those areas that do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's usually for me, it's around like age. Like you didn't, right? And I actually went through this recently again. You didn't know, like you didn't do this work soon enough. And here you are, whatever age, right? It's all whatever, how long I've been on earth side. And it's this lack of forgiveness of not having it sooner. And then the comparing of, look at all the people that had this soon, like they're so young, they're 10 years younger than. So if that's for me where mine shows up, and then it will turn into like, well, why didn't I have it sooner? Oh, because I was having to go through all this stuff that my parents kind of not put me through, but is stuff that I signed up for on a soul level. But I was young. And so then I had to spend my 20s healing. But I didn't know that, So then I have to go back into that whole story again of like, oh, I'm too old. I should have done this, 10 years ago. But then I forget because my parents did this. I had to, and it becomes this whole story. And then I have to just like, it's okay. You're
Yeah,
exactly where you're supposed to be. And then do the forgiveness of like my parents, our parents are operating from literally all that they know, you
right.
know? Yeah.
Well, I went through that too, Fallon, like at 25, right? I'm just like, oh my God,
I'm
like
so young.
living in illusion. Well, I know, but like,
At the
like,
time.
oh,
Yeah.
but what I realized, and maybe anybody listening that might be able to resonate with feeling that way of like, I'm so behind, I went through all this stuff. What I learned for myself is that what you went through is actually the gift. That's actually
Hmm.
the gift. It's not like wasted time. Like that's actually what you're needing to start sharing
Oh,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, you've been doing it.
Yeah. Oh, it totally. And that will always what comes out in my journaling was like, that's why you get to do what you do now. Is all of this is the road, to it's all the path. So It's funny how that plays out though. And it does, it'll still come up. And then I go through the whole thing again. And then I'm reminded again, well, this is the path. And this is why I get to do what I do now. Cause I wouldn't be able to do this now if that wasn't part of the process. So yeah. Do you find that too, that sometimes you're like going through the same stuff and then you're like, okay, let me get out of this loop now. Cause it's like sometimes you can get in this loop over and over. Yeah.
For mine, and I think this is ancestral too. I don't think this is all mine, but my loop is you're going to get in trouble. There's someone that's not going to like it. You're going to get in trouble for being authentically like big and shiny and like
Wow.
you're going to offend somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get small, but then I get angry that I got small, and then I put them as the villain and myself as the victim. I mean, it's a ridiculous cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's the awareness around it. And that's what I'm really hoping people that are in this series and doing this work, that we really create an awareness around that no matter where we're at in the path. And, I consider you very far on the path, the spiritual path, your awakening path, you're very awakened, that it still shows up. And I think that's really important for us to always remember that we're still, and you and I have talked about this anyways, that we're still on earth and we're still human beings. And we've got to allow that to exist and honor that as well, that we are in a human body and there is the spectrum of emotions. And because we're human, sometimes even though like you've done all of this work, it still comes up for you. And you're like, oh, really? It's there more. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it always will. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so talk to me. Do you have any self-love rituals that you would consider specific self-love rituals? Or what does your self-love, self-care right now look like?
Mm-hmm. It looks like, actually funny because of the card that you pulled.
Yeah.
It's finding balance. So my self-love right now, the ritual or the intention for self-love is being in balance with masculine and feminine within myself. So for me, it's so the feminine being, surrendering, releasing control, and then the masculine protecting and like doing the work. And I've been overly masculine most of my career and life, and doing, trying to get the approval.
Yeah.
So for me, self-love looks like being more in the feminine and co-creating with the universe, letting go of the reins and allowing people to find me or things to happen for me. Mm-hmm. That's actually my self-love. It's just, am I in balance?
Yeah. I love that. And I think that most women, we've operated in the masculine, especially when we're driven. And I think women that are drawn to us are very driven, very focused, very goal oriented. And almost this wanting to prove space, but also wanting to create and give our offerings and our services because there's such power and healing that exists in us. That we were born with these gifts, that we want to do that. So we get caught up in, let me just keep going and producing.
Yeah.
And then this, and that's something I find a lot in my clients is, what if you just allowed yourself to take a hot bath? Or like, I know you go to the river, the Boise River, and allowing yourself to be and not actually need results to prove that we're worthy of existence or worthy of having a business or worthy of making money or whatever it is.
Yep.
I love that.
Well, I was going to say too, the shadow will show up when you give space for it too. Like that's another key component of if you want to do shadow work, make room for it.
Yeah. And does making room for the shadow look like obviously taking space, right? Like because you have to unplug. You can't do shadow work while you're, typing your bio or whatever it is. But is it like taking space to look at like, okay, I know this person's triggered me. They've been triggering me. What's there? Is that what that looks like for you? Yeah.
And also like looking at when I stop producing or doing, or even when I stop creating, what shows up for me? Like when I don't do all the things, do I feel unimportant? Do I feel not validated? What does that say about where I'm getting my worth? That's, yeah.
No, I love that. I find that a lot too, or mine is a big one that has come up is like this fear of missing out. If I don't take the program, if I don't have the coach, if I'm not on social media, if I take the time to unplug, right? And honor my divine feminine of, maybe creating in a different way, or resting or trusting the unknown, like all of it. There's this big fear of missing out for me. And it goes back into like my childhood of friends and different things like that. But I like that. There's more, I'm trying to feel into more, because you just said like a mouthful there. Like you just said something like, and no, not a mouthful in a bad way, but in like really deep, like what shows up when you are allowing yourself to rest. And then you said, because I really want to hit on this, what does that mean about where I'm getting my worth?
Yeah. Because I'm speaking for myself here, but when I took the sabbatical, for example, what showed up was being alone. And what, a layer under that showed up is like isolation, which then also like pulled me into this whole past life of being isolated. That's a whole other thing. But I think that we are afraid of not being busy, because there is stuff that needs to be looked at when we slow down. And I think on some level we know that.
It makes it more real because it gives it a little bit of life. That makes sense. And that can be uncomfortable. And it's like, it's like when you say things out loud, kind of like what you're touching on earlier about manifestation, but it's like when you say things out loud, like when women or men will start to make the decision, like, I'm getting a divorce, for instance.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've kept that in. I said it out loud. It makes it real. So it's like taking the space also makes it, whatever's brewing underneath, it makes it real. Yeah.
And we're in the Lionsgate portal too. I mean, that's like, this is the time to let it come up so that it can go, so that you can release it.
Yeah. Yes. What are you doing anything specific for Lionsgate? As I'll be posting this during this portal before the 12th.
Perfect. Yeah. This is a ritual that I got from, oh shoot, I forgot her name. I'll send it to you so you can link it, but it's a woman on YouTube. I love her. And she suggested a ritual to do every day. And it is, let's see, I wrote it down. It's, so talk to the Syrians, I guess, just invite them in. I ask you to activate, assimilate, and anchor these higher frequencies into my body and into my life. And that's whenever something shows up. So if something comes up for me, which a lot's been coming up around fear, use that ritual, ask them to see it, give you clear vision, and then to take it and release it, because that's how we're actually going to be moving up into different timelines.
I love it.
Yeah. Super simple.
Yeah, I was gonna say, then that's easy. I mean, it's taking the time to do it, but it's, yeah. Again, I think that, somebody messaged me yesterday from just Instagram. They're like, how do you know where to put your crystals? And how do you know this? And I said, I don't know. I just trust that it feels good. And I think that sometimes we forget, like, it goes back to Spencer. He was on like, just feel good, like just do what feels good and trust that. Yeah.
Come into here, into your heart.
Absolutely. So I want to go a little bit more into forgiveness. I feel called to just kind of ask, obviously you had to do some forgiveness around your parents, and I'm sure romantic relationships. What was your hardest person or situation to forgive, and how did you work through that? Like, how did you, other than, right, like, we know, I mean, not that that's not important stuff, the inner child and seeing them as a little child, because that really cultivates the compassion that we need to begin the forgiveness. But how did you, because it's a road, right? Like we start to forgive and then we get angry again, and we start to forgive and get angry again. So what was probably just talk to me about that.
Sure. So without using names, what's coming up for me right now that actually has been the hardest was my recent marriage or divorce, I should say. And the situations that presented themselves again required me to choose myself over all else. So long story short, it was like, so I got married and became a stepmother of 4 children. And I was a stepmom for about 5.5, almost 6 years to these beautiful beings. And the ego has lots of stories around that. And I totally had an agenda around that, not realizing it at the time, but now looking back, was super excited about what that meant. And then my then husband told me about 3 or 4 years into the marriage that he wanted an open relationship. So what happened for me was, it was a huge choice point that I believe we actually both contracted to come and do. And I know he provided a huge opportunity again for me to choose myself, even though, I wanted a family. I wanted that community. I wanted to be a mother in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really was an initiation of a lot of choosing me again. But how I worked through that is letting the stages of grief happen so that I could come to the real perspective. The higher perspective was that was supposed to happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that there was no mistakes, that wasn't a mistake to do it that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I know when we're in the beginning of a journey like that, of feeling like we've been wronged, by somebody that we love, or feeling that life is unfair. I really love that you said that you allowed the stages of grief, because I think so often we want to get to the end result to feel better so bad. But it's like, if we rush that process, we really miss the depths of not only the lessons and the wisdom, but of ourself, and really what we're capable of our strength, in choosing yourself. And that's clearly been something that you've needed to learn in this life.
Like, I keep asking for that to be like completed. Like, can I please be done that lesson? Because it's been literally my whole life so far.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. And then, so I think that we need to always be reminded that it's okay if it takes time. There's no linear timeline for forgiveness to occur. I think as long as we're always inviting in that it can exist, if we can invite in that I'm not ready to forgive this person yet, but I will invite in the existence, the pebble of existence. Because one day that pebble, might turn into a pearl. So,
right. And I think forgiveness doesn't have to ever mean we're okay with what happened. It's more like we realize our worth, and our worthiness to feel joy is more important. So it's like forgiveness is for ourselves. It's when we're ready to say, I no longer carry this. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. And that is another thing I think people really, you touched on that so well, because people think that forgiveness means that they're letting the other person like off their hook, or like scot-free, versus dropping into divine feminine, right? And trusting that all is taken care of energetically. And one thing I think that might be new to this group is that we really do sign up for many things on a soul contract level, on a soul level. That a lot of this we chose, and sometimes that can feel really triggering at first. Yeah. Did you find that?
Yeah, my ego really did not like that. It's like when you fully take responsibility, like full responsibility for everything that shows up in your life, it's a whole new game. It's a whole new perspective. Everything shifts. Yeah.
And there's also an empowerment too. Truly, what we hear and see all the time now in our spiritual community of like, why is this happening for me? But that can feel triggering at first. Like, I didn't choose this. They did this to me. And it's constantly that, they did it. And I responded because of them. When, on an energetic level, on a soul level, we actually came in probably, who knows how long before in this lifetime, and said, hey, I'm going to meet you here. This is okay. So you want to learn about choosing yourself? Like, that's like Jess is like, I want to learn about choosing myself over and over and over until I really ingrain it in this lifetime. And then these other souls show up to give you that opportunity. And And like you said, you know, in the beginning of, we really make them the villain. And at the same time, like, who have we been a villain in their story when we were operating from our highest self? You know I have absolutely played the villain in people's stories and heartbreaks. And I, you know, and I'm sure that in you choosing yourself, that has probably been villainized, you know, for you before by others. Yeah.
Yep.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm going to check the time. We're actually like rocking and rolling.
Are we?
Yeah, we're covering a lot more than, not that I mean, I guess I didn't really have any expectations. I just wanted to give us like this breathing space because I didn't want us to feel constricted for time just in case. Just, you know, I didn't know what was going to come up. And so if you were to give advice to somebody brand new to like really even spirituality, and they're starting to just, you know, like that flicker of like, oh, there's more and I'm called to do more, but I don't know what that looks like. What advice would you give a new person?
To kind of start their spiritual journey?
Mm-hmm.
Well, from my perspective, it would be starting with the body. So when we think spiritual, a lot of times people think, oh, I got to go up, you know, I got to go up there. And I guess from my perspective, we have to go in the body. And so I would say start to have more of a relationship with your body. And however that looks, feel it more, get in touch with your senses more, look at what you might be avoiding in your body, or if you've been neglecting any part of health, a lot of that stuff will show up for you that's actually quite spiritually based.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And then talk to me a little bit more as people are still new, you know, maybe new to this journey or going deeper. You work with the 12 archetypes, right? You work with not the 12, like 12 shadow archetypes, correct, in your practice?
Well, so I mentioned that to you because over the sabbatical and actually over the past year, as I was developing kind of a business model with a business partner at the time, we had kind of come up with 12 archetypes that we wanted to kind of work with. And because there's literally hundreds of archetypes,
it's a lot.
It's really easy to get lost in that. So we had narrowed it down to 12, and I tend to just still work with those ones. Yeah.
If we were to start with, let's say 3, and I'm going to actually have you give me the 12 so I can give that as a reference, but I don't know if you like memorize them. If you do, we can go through it, like just the names of all 12. But if you wanted to give somebody like 2 or 3 that you see a lot.
I would say start with the easiest one that plays out the most often is the drama triangle, which is like hero, villain, and victim. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can put those anywhere on the triangle points. And then that's honestly the one I see the most of. This is those 3.
I love that. The drama triangle. Yeah. I was actually only introduced to that one recently. And I was like, I mean, I had been doing work around those anyways, but I was like, oh, I didn't realize that's what it was like titled. As like the drama. So yeah, I think we'll just let people start there, the drama triangle, because I think that's like what we see the most in this life right now.
And don't forget there's light and dark to them, right? So like the hero is like, maybe even if this is mostly women that are listening to this, right? Mm-hmm. We tend to go there a lot too, of like wanting to save people or wanting to kind of sometimes under the guise of really wanting to be helpful. We can enable and like carry the load for people that really need to be carrying it. So, but then there's also, you know, the light side of that is there really are times that we need to advocate and help our brothers and sisters. So knowing the difference. Yeah.
That's a good one. 'Cause we can definitely hide under the martyr.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've definitely done that in my past.
Me too.
And then, we might go a little bit longer, but I mean, we've got plenty of time. Talk to me. So you mentioned agendas a couple of times, and just to be clear, I think that just to like clarify for the audience, do you feel like you're not aware of your agenda until it's like hindsight?
Totally.
Yeah. Hindsight. So a good practice is to even get into shadow. And I mean, and this is all self-love and this is all forgiveness. It's so just intertwined, would be to go back and find, I think something, wouldn't you say something like that feels a little light, right? And where did I have an agenda around that?
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like too heavy, you know, because you got to
Yeah.
start. Yeah.
That's a good place to start. Yeah. Maybe even looking back at, maybe even recently, something that maybe made you upset or heartbroken or something like that, and then taking the ownership of what your part in that was and what agenda you had for that situation. That's a great place to start, and then work backwards from there. And then it's easier to apply to what's happening right now in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love that. Yeah. I just kept hearing you mention agenda and I was like, man, that's such a hindsight. But if we can start somewhere small, and I feel like I shared on our my group call recently with this series, past agendas I had. Oh, like in a gossip agenda, I would show up in a space acting very curious and concerned of like, well, what's going on? But really the underlying agenda was to be in the gossip, to be in the know. So I didn't feel left out. And so, yeah, so and that was like way more in my 20s that I became aware of like, I actually don't really, I care about these people, but I'm not showing up with that agenda. I'm showing up with the agenda of, I just really want to be in the group and in the know. So let me act like I care so I can get the gossip and make me feel included.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big one for me for a long time, And I see it, I see it in my family. I see that play out a lot in my family. So, I would imagine that that's ancestral as well. That has just been passed down and passed down and passed down.
Yeah. That's another way to look at things too, is really piecing out, if you hold a certain belief, is that actually something that's happening in my life, or is it just stored within me? That's like that's where I think looking at the evidence of things can be really helpful. Is this actually playing out in my life, or is this possibly ancestral? Like for example, me carrying this idea that I'm going to get in trouble, or someone's going to put me in jail, or who knows. I mean, it's kind of weird and out there. But when you really can Hilarion too, as far as I understand, is he's kind of like logical, and he helps kind of bridge logic and spirit. And so knowing when to bring in that logic and get clear of like, this isn't actually happening right now.
Yeah.
So it might not be mine to carry.
Yeah. I love that. And that was something that came up for me in Sedona when I had my, like a small anxiety attack. I was like, oh, this is actually not mine. Right. So this is not true for me anymore. This anxiety, this fear isn't true for me anymore. It was my parents and it was ancestral and all of that. But, it definitely takes a pause, again, the space.
Yes. Yeah.
To do the work, to feel it, like you said, and be in your body. Like, is this real? Is this like, yeah. And is this actually showing up in my life, or am I just used to thinking this way? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. Excuse me. I just don't want to cough right in the microphone. I'm just looking at my notes that we've been taking. So if you see me looking off, that's why. Oh, so wrapping up, what are some tools that you maybe give your clients to do after they're doing, whether they're building on their self-love journey, they're diving in the shadow, or they have forgiveness work? Again, we're doing it all at one point or another, all at the same time sometimes. What are some tools that you offer people that you would give like a friend, but also in that I want you to talk to me more about your business and what you've just launched your website and you've just started to come out. So let's go into that and your offerings. Because one thing I want everyone to know is you are a healer. And I remember in Sedona, we were, doing healing on each other, like as a group. And the next day, Sonia was like, Jess's hands were the hottest. She goes, no offense. She goes, no offense to you. And I'm like, well, I haven't been doing this work as long as her. I wouldn't take offense at all. But you were just born to be such a healer. And so, yeah, I want you to really share with me about what your offerings are, how people can find you, what tools you would give people, whether they're a client or not a client, and stuff like that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So, okay. So I'll start with the website is yotherarise.com. So YOTHERARISE, yotherarise.com. And so Yothera is my brand, my personal brand
I
that
love it.
embodies yoga, not the poses, but the body mind connection, yoga and therapy. So it's a mix of embodied therapy work.
Mm.
And what I like to specialize in is actually working with other healers. That can look like other mental health therapists. It can look like anybody that wants to or is already working in the holistic health integrative medical field. So that was anybody that identifies as a healer. And the invitation is I do groups here in Boise. I've talked to Fallon about this, but I'd like to do more online groups at some point. Right now, my groups are in Boise, but then I do one-on-one work that's either in person or on Zoom. And I do a lot of either just breathwork sessions, or I do a combination of like Yothera sessions, which can be like an eyes closed practice where we do some body movements, talking to your inner archetypes, looking at the shadow work from like a subconscious perspective. So it's really slowing down the brain waves to get into that subconscious mind.
Yeah.
Sometimes can do past life type regressions, things like that can show up. And then a lot of times we do writing and then speaking manifestation type practices as well. So I don't have an agenda. Again, like that's kind of the theme. I really show up just without an agenda from each person and meet the moment for whatever is needed that day. And it turns out a lot better that way.
Well, you have such powerful intuition too, and you've been doing this for so long that I would imagine you're so tuned into what your clients need in that moment.
Yeah, and they are too. I mean, when I give space and don't come with an agenda, they often, them or their higher self will show up with exactly what's needed in that moment. So it's pretty amazing.
They get to guide you through their own.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. And
Yeah.
so you do offer Zoom
Uh-huh. Yeah,
calls.
I do. And then maybe a resource that, people could use is the heart breath. So look up heart breath. And it's actually it's an alchemical breath that's Nikki Scully is her name. She wrote Alchemical Healing. So I love this breath. Anybody can use it, but it's drawing in all of the elements from earth and then also from sky into the heart. And then actually drawing in possibly like the pain of the world and then like releasing it as healing. So Tonglen, that's another way of saying it, but that's a breath I would encourage everybody to drop into and help to open the heart and get out of the head. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. And
Yeah.
the last thing I'm feeling called to ask you is I would imagine when you were married with 4 kids, your stepkids, that you still have relationships and you talk to them. As a busy mom, because you can't enter into any type of mother role, whether they're biological or not biological, and naturally become a part of the process of the scheduling, of the waking up, of the very earthly things that we're doing. And so for the moms out there watching, you were able to still do a lot of your work, right, of healing your soul work and all of this while you had a family and kept very busy. So what did maybe that look like for you? Or what do you feel called to share with other mothers in that role?
Absolutely. That's such a good question, Fallon. I remember a very distinct perspective shift, again, that had to happen for me during that time, but also now, is that you are still doing the work. It just isn't looking like what your agenda or your ego thinks it's supposed to look like. So if you have an idea of doing spiritual work, being by yourself in the, oming or whatever,
Yeah.
that's not it.
Yeah.
That's the ego saying it has to look like this. Like your children are your biggest teachers. At least that was for me, is that the child is the ultimate sovereign being, the inner child. And he or she is here to teach you something huge. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it can be sometimes as simple as allowing, and you mentioned this earlier, what is the intention behind what you're doing or the agenda, right? But if we can go into it with intention. So I know for me, if I go into the intention with Nova of making play with her part of my inner child practice, then I'm doing my spiritual work. It just may, again, not look like I'm in lotus pose, like owing my life away and then journaling and, and the stuff that I actually really do enjoy, but it is that shift in perspective of what it has to look like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So did you just, did you kind of do the same? Like, talk to me when you were in that situation. Yeah. Talk to me just a little bit, just to give them a little bit more like something tangible.
I remember saying to myself, and then also asking from my guides or my angels throughout the day of, please show me externally what it is that I need to see to learn what I need to learn. So I would actually ask for it to be externally shown to me. And a lot of times that would come through a child, one of the children, or whatever. I mean, they're more mirrors for you to look. So I would just say, make it simple. You don't have to do anything big except ask and be open to receiving the messages that you need to get that day.
Yeah.
And it really will show up.
I love that. And one thing that I do too is I keep my phone handy to voice record, because a lot of times when we're shown, we're like not at the most convenient time. So I'll keep something handy to record really quick of like what's coming through or what I'm seeing or what I'm feeling. So then after the kids are to bed or after I've got my work done, because there's a lot of career women too, after you get your work done, then you can go back and say, okay, now I've got the space, I've got 10 minutes to revisit this, and feel and go back into feeling it, because sometimes we don't have the luxury of really being in our bodies to feel what's coming up in that moment. But we can always say, hey, I see you, I acknowledge you, I know you're there, I'm coming back.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Acknowledge it. Yeah, well, thank you. So yotherarise.com, and is your Facebook, is it your full name or is it Jess Maitri?
I have a business page called Yothera, but it doesn't, Facebook algorithms, all that. It's not, I would just find me on Facebook, Jess Maitri, Maitri. There's more activity going on there.
Awesome. And your Instagram is Yothera?
It's Yothera Rise, I think.
Rise. Okay, perfect. And so people can book with you on your website?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then contact you. And obviously you guys can contact me and I can put you in touch with her as well. So I just want to thank you so much. Is there anything else you feel called to share? I feel like we covered a lot of goodness.
I feel like we did too. I'm just really grateful. Thank you so much for that opportunity to practice speaking about what I do and my passion.
Thank you. And I'm going to stop recording now, and then I'm going to just say goodbye to you.
Okay.
So thank you.